Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, as normal, we're going to continue reading from a document called Questions about the Spiritual World. These are questions that were asked to Srila Prabhupada, which I'm researching on vanipedia.com. It's a search forum created by a devotee named Vishnumurti to help us better access what we're looking for in Prabhupada's books and to help us gain a taste for hearing about Prabhupada and to help us appreciate the power of the words of Srila Prabhupada in making conscious. And also, I think also to make Prabhupada's books more accessible, Prabhupada's words more accessible and appreciable. So that's what we're going to do. And yesterday, what were we discussing yesterday? I can't remember. What was the end of our discussion yesterday? And I said, if you had any questions, remember we couldn't answer all the questions. And I said, if you have any questions, then save them from yesterday. And I just can't remember what we ended up discussing. There were many comments and questions. But in any case, if you have a question from yesterday, please put it up. Let's see. So I'm going to wait for you. I'm going to locate where we're going to start. I'm going to wait for you to see if you want to put up your questions. I do know now I remember, we were talking about a world in which everyone saw everyone as spiritual beings, Krishna in the heart. We had talked about that. Seeing Krishna everywhere. And September 18th, Bombay. Okay. Yeah, we had talked about that. So if you have a comment or question you want to put up that wasn't addressed yesterday, then you can put it up now. And we're going to chant Imagine. No, we're not going to chant Imagine. We're going to chant Jai Radha Madhava. Although yesterday we were chanting Imagine because we were talking about how the Vidya Vinaya Sampane, the humble Brahman, sees everyone equally, and what an amazing world it would be. Remember that? If everyone sees Krishna equally, how amazing that would be. We had talked about that, right? You remember? Right? Remember that? But I couldn't figure out how to play it until the end of class. And I was like fooling around. I go, oh, this is how you play it. Imagine all the people chanting Hari Nam. That's what but we're not going to chant that now. We're going to chant that later sometime. We're going to chant Jai Radha Madhava. So just give me a moment to set everything up. This is the best I can do right now for my one-man band. Maybe we tried Kartos Mridanga yesterday, background. I don't know if that worked so well. I didn't get any feedback from you, so I have a sense it wasn't so great. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Shodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Shodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Jamanatira Vanachari. Jamanatira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari. Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Maha Mantra ki jai. Krishna consciousness ki jai. All the devotees ki jai. Prasadam ki jai. Japa ki jai. Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai ki jai. All of you ki jai. May you be victorious in all your efforts. Hare Krishna. Okay. So I'm just going to go back up and see if there are any questions or comments from yesterday. Is this the next verse room conversation? I think you're right. I will just double check. Yeah, that's right. We had the last one. The question was, will everyone go back to Godhead? And the answer is yes, eventually. And so the eventually is the key, you know. You might go back this lifetime or a million lifetimes. So eventually you'll get there, or a million yugas. So Kamalakshi Radhika says, you asked me to request this yesterday. The problem with being colorblind is that it means that you are denying the difficulties that people of color have due to racism. Okay, well, that's interesting. It keeps one from having any empathy or compassion because you are denying that their day-to-day experience is any different than yours. There's a white privilege mentality. That is my... Oh yeah, okay. Thank you. I was making the assumption that when someone says I'm colorblind, they meant that they don't distinguish. But I guess when some people say they don't distinguish, which means what you say, they don't notice. The sign of Krishna consciousness is that you feel pain when others are in pain. And of course, to feel pain when others are in pain, you have to notice that they're in pain, which is a problem. Can be a problem. But I think sometimes the problem, Kamalakshi, is that sometimes we don't know how others are suffering unless they tell us. Because let's say in my life I never suffered a certain way. So I don't know another kind of, like, let's say I was never discriminated against. Well, I was never discriminated against until I went on the street with a bed sheet and a shaved head. Then I started to understand. It actually helped me. I started to understand what it's like to be a minority because of the way we were dealt with. But you know the story of Nala Kuvera and Manigriva? So they had become proud, sons of Kuvera, very wealthy. And in the Krishna book, in that story, Prabhupada makes a very interesting point, a very important point, I think, for us. He said that sometimes the wealthy become insensitive and the poor become more sensitive. And he said that oftentimes, if a person was poor and they become wealthy, they do a lot of charitable work because they know what it's like to be poor. He said, but if they were never poor, sometimes they don't really understand it. So it might not be that they're bad people, they just don't understand the pain of poverty. And so maybe they're not as generous as they would be if they were in poverty. There's an amazing video. It never ceases to amaze me. Of a social experiment, and one or two young men go around and they meet homeless people and they say, can I buy you, have you eaten? And he said, well, I haven't eaten today. He said, can I buy you something? And they're kind of humbled. And so they brought some food to this one man. And then they leave and they want to see what they're going to do. And this guy gets up and he walks around the block and he splits the food up with other hungry homeless people. But he doesn't take any for himself. And then he comes back to where he was first met by the people doing the social experiment. And he sits back down. He's got a little sign, I'm hungry, please help me, something like that. So the people doing the social experiment, because they followed him, they saw what he did, and they came back and they said, we actually followed you around, and we saw what you did, and that's amazing. And they asked him, it must have been around lunchtime, or at least lunchtime. And they said, have you eaten today? And he said, no. They said, why did you give that food away if you haven't eaten? He said, well, the other people are hungry. I was like, that's amazing, right? But that wasn't the only time it happened. They did another social experiment where they put an 8-year-old girl on the street. It looked like Oxford Street, and she had a little sign, something like, I'm hungry, my mother left me here, or my mother's at work, I don't have anything to eat. And all these people are walking by, and they're kind of looking at the sign. This is, they want to see. You remember we were going to do a social experiment in Mayapur where we were going to have a brahmacharini sit down and pretend like something really horrible had happened. And she's just like, it's going to be right near the brahmachari ashram, and she's going to sit down and cry. And they're going to see if any of the men do anything. We're not going to do it, but it was a discussion, just as the social condition of ISKCON. So finally, one woman stops, and she sees this girl, and so it's like, what's going on? And so, well, my mother, my mother's a drug addict, or my mother's a maid or something, and she just left me here, and I didn't have anything to eat today, and I'm just trying. So this woman goes out and buys her some food and gives her some money and sits with her and talks with her. And so the people doing the social experiment ended up talking to the woman, and they found out that that woman was a homeless woman who helped the little girl and gave her everything. Then they did another experiment. They sat next to a homeless. They knew the man was homeless. He was sitting on a bench, and they sat next to him. And they did a fake conversation. And the fake conversation was he couldn't pay a bill, and if he didn't pay the bill, his daughter was going to get kicked out of school or something, really, really traumatic if he didn't get the money, didn't have the money. And he's calling somebody, can you loan me the money I needed? So, he's acting it out. And this homeless man hears it. But what happened before in this social experiment? They saw this homeless man, and they came up to him and said, we want to do something for you because we see that you're homeless. So we want to buy something for you. So they bought him a sleeping bag because he didn't really have sufficient warm cloth. They bought him a sleeping bag. Or somehow they went with him to get the sleeping bag. So when he heard that this man was having trouble, he said, just wait a minute, just stay here, I can help you. He went, returned the sleeping bag, got the money, and gave it to him. Something like that. And then they told him, he said, actually, this was fake. We couldn't believe it. He said, you have nothing, you gave everything. And then you have the example that Prabhupada was giving is that when someone's wealthy and they never suffered, they may not be so compassionate. So I think that's a problem with this, what you're saying, colorblind. And some Indian told me they call it colorism in India because of the different shades of skin. They can kind of tell your caste, that nasty word caste, and judge you based on that. And then your opportunities in life will be limited by your caste. So, it's getting better, I'm sure, in India, but that's generally how it's been. So I thought that was I think that's an interesting point. So, and then in the Gita, Krishna says, you understand the suffering of others through your own suffering. And then there's one commentary, I don't know where, it said that the devotees, they can be more compassionate than Krishna because Krishna never suffers. But the devotee comes into this world, he takes on a material body, he knows what suffering is, so he can even be more compassionate, in a sense. At least you say he can relate to the suffering. Said Krishna can't relate to the suffering because he never suffered. A devotee can. It's interesting. And then the verse in the Bhagavad Gita that you understand the suffering of others through your own suffering. In other words, you put yourself in another person's position and you think, oh, they must be suffering in this position because if I were in that position, I'd be suffering. Can you hold on a second? A few ghosts just came in the door there. I have to ask them to leave. And then I'll close the door. So, I've always found personally that if we can somehow, I don't know if the word is empathize, sympathize with the suffering or the difficulty of others, then we will overcome the tendency to discriminate, be prejudiced, and so forth. If we can, we may not have trouble, we may not be discriminated against, or we may not have difficulty. But if we see another devotee, or another race of devotees, or another gender of devotees, or another ethnicity of devotees, or any people, and we see that they have difficulty, then if we can feel what they're feeling, then at that point we actually become motivated to do something. I think if it's just in your head, it's harder. Because when you feel it, it pushes you to act. Emotions push you to action. And I think that's what Krishna is saying. He's saying when you feel, this is, as I remember the verse, when you feel the suffering or you relate to the suffering of another as your own, then that's compassion. That's when you actually help people. That's, you could say, a definition of compassion. So we have this, concept of white privilege, but, it could be Brahmin privilege, it could be aristocracy privilege, it could be... well, I'll tell you something interesting. I've preached in many colleges around the world. Not around the world, around America. And there were some schools that we went to where all the students were just, and I can say all the students, but so many students were very, very open, very receptive, very willing to take a book and so forth. And there were places, I won't mention the names of colleges, but the more prestigious the college, the more difficult it was because the students felt, entitled, privileged, superior. They're smarter, they come from better families, it's a wealthy university. So we noticed that trend, and I don't want to fault them for that. I think it's natural. It's a natural problem in the material world. When you are raised in privilege, you have above average intelligence, you can look down upon other people. And here comes this bald-headed guy in what looks like a big diaper, and so, yeah. So these are realities. In these realities, we have to look at our own self and say, am I part of that reality? And what I have found is one of the greatest qualities, I think, of anyone, devotee, non-devotee, anybody, one of the greatest qualities is when you're not suffering, you don't have a problem, but you're concerned that other people have the problems that you don't have. And like I said, you can't be concerned if you don't notice the problem, right? So that you notice it, it concerns you. In a sense, you become intolerant when people are mistreated. You say, well, it doesn't bother, it's not my business, that these people or these devotees are mistreated. It's, we're fine where we are. Nobody's mistreating us. That's a problem. And so when you become more sensitive to the sufferings of others that you don't personally have, that's a magnanimous quality. I think a lot of times what we see in this, one of my god sisters, she was talking about how sometimes women are not treated as well as they should be, or she felt they should be, in our movement, in some places. And we were talking about it, and I was asking her what she's doing about it. And she said, it's not the women that should be the ones, it has to be the men. He said, they have to stand up for us. And I thought that was a really good point. And I totally embraced that idea. Even before she said that, I embraced that idea. I realized that. And that's where the compassion comes in. You're fine, but you see another group of devotees that are not fine. And rather than them standing up for themselves, you see that it's not your problem, but it becomes your problem because they have a problem. And you try to represent them because perhaps your voice is stronger. I think that's really, really important. And as I said, that can only happen if you even notice there's a problem. I think, like in our movement, I think for a lot of men, they don't, I mean, this is how I think. I think a lot that I don't know if I want to come back to ISKCON as a woman. I don't know if I would be able to deal with that, if it's, the best position. Or maybe in some temples it's fine, but in certain places. And that being said, or that being true, then shouldn't I try to do something to make it better? Not because I care, if I come back as a woman, but just as a figure of speech I was saying that. But to see, if there's in some places, they're not given the same facilities as men to do service, or they're looked down upon, or derogatory statements are made about them and so on, then I would think, if I were a woman coming back in ISKCON, I don't know if I'd want to be in an ISKCON like this. I don't know if I'd be happy. That being the case, shouldn't I be a voice for them if I have a voice and my voice can do something? I would say yes. But my point is, until I even notice what's going on, and I don't say every temple has problems like this, but we've seen, not just with women, but with different classes of devotees, younger devotees, African black devotees, certain castes of Indian devotees, and like that. We see this, and it exists. Why does it exist? Well, it exists because we're in the material world, even though we're devotees. There's prejudice and racism that was programmed into us growing up. So it may manifest in some way, subtly or unknowingly, or maybe manifest in a way that devotees or leaders may think, no, this is the way it's supposed to be done, and not really understand the issues well and how people are feeling. So I feel this is, I've always felt this is difficult. It's like when your belly is full, have you ever been really, really hungry? Like really, really hungry. And for some reason, whatever it is, it's a fast day, or you're too lazy to cook, or circumstantially you couldn't eat, to the point of, this is painful, I really need to eat. I can't do anything right now. Don't talk to me, I'll get mad at you, type thing. I need to eat. And if you ever thought at that point, when you're really, really, you could call it starving, you're not starving, but it feels like you are. So we use that word to say, I'm starving. Have you ever thought about the reality that how many millions of people go to bed hungry every night? It's at that point when you're that hungry that you have to eat, at that point you can start to empathize with people who don't have food. I mean, it's hard to empathize after your belly's full, isn't it? You agree? And there are many people with full bellies who do empathize with the hunger. Or there are people who don't have pain that empathize with people who have pain. That's compassion. That's Krishna's definition of compassion. And so, you know, I find it interesting. Like, if you use the word compassion, it may have a different connotation for different people, what it means. But this connotation is very important. And this is something I have noticed over the years, that certain devotees that I've seen seem to be voices for the minorities. You could say the minorities, or the voices for those whose voices need to be heard but aren't heard. So that's compassion. And it's very easy to not see it. It's very easy not to see when a devotee is not happy or needs help. It's easy not to see it because I'm happy, I'm fine. So I think everybody's happy and fine. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. Not in this life. I don't know what it's like to be black or Indian of a lower caste. And I don't know what it's like for people to look at me. This one devotee, he's born in America, born as a devotee, African American. And he said something really interesting. It's almost shocking. He travels a lot around the world. He said, as soon as I meet a devotee, I can tell almost instantly if they feel a little awkward about me as a black person, like they're uneasy or something is wrong. He said, I can sense it immediately. Isn't that interesting? So the question, it's not funny, but the question we could ask ourselves, if you met that devotee, would he sense that in you? That's a heavy question. In any case, we as individuals, we would do well for ourselves and do well for the world and do well for ISKCON if we develop compassion that can enable us in some way to feel the suffering of other people when we don't have that suffering. That's that story of Nalakuvera. I don't know if you picked up on this reading that story, but that's one of the points at Nalakuvera and Manigriva, that wealthy people, it's difficult for them to understand what it's like to suffer, like the suffering of poverty. And I think Prabhupada also mentions, he said, when a sadhu goes home to home begging, he said the poor people are more likely to invite him in, or if they don't invite him in, to feed him. And the wealthier are more likely to say, get away, why are you begging, get a job, or to feel somewhat superior. Oh, you're coming to beg for me, so that puts me in a superior position. And then Prabhupada tells a story of a very wealthy man became a renunciate. I think he moved to Vrindavan, became a renunciate, and then he was collecting, probably for a temple, I forget what, and he was collecting. And he was going door to door begging, please give me a rupee. And he was going to his enemies, political enemies or whatever, former enemies, begging from them. Hare Krishna. Interesting. So when I can just tell you my own experience. I think I mentioned this a couple of days ago. I used to go into black neighborhoods because they were more accepting. And so I immediately understood that because they had been discriminated against for generations in America, when they saw me in my saffron diaper and my shaved head and war paint on my forehead, I'm just using these terms, kind of, it sounds derogatory, because I'm just using these terms of how people might see us. What's that war paint? Why are you wearing bed sheets? And shaved heads in those days were not fashionable, so a little strange. And I noticed how accepting they were. Same thing with Mexicans, especially the lower income Mexicans. There was very accepting, very open. And as I said, as a devotee, I had a little experience, and especially in the 70s as a devotee, because it was so weird, and nobody even knew what the Hare Krishna movement was. They just saw these people. They just thought there were a few weird people in our city. And so we got to experience a little bit of discrimination, being discriminated against. Like nobody, don't you know that I went to the University of California, Berkeley, and I studied it? They don't know that. They just see me dressed like some crazy guy, and they deal with me as such. Very humbling and very purifying. And I think it invoked, in me at least, I think it invoked a little bit of compassion for the minorities who were discriminated against. And when I would distribute books in the black communities, I could understand exactly what was going on in their minds, or, maybe I can't say exactly, but I had experience of discrimination, so I could relate to what they may go through on a regular basis. And that's why I went there. And then I had one other experience. In America we have, I don't know if you have this in Europe, in America we have these stores. They're called dollar stores. You have those in Europe? Well, initially a dollar store, everything was $1, and there is still one in America, I think it's called Dollar Tree. Everything's $1. But in the dollar store, now it's like everything's cheap. Not everything's $1. Some things are $2, $5, $8. But initially, it started as everything $1. So who shops in the store where everything's $1? Well, you didn't see any Mercedes-Benz in the parking lot. Actually, you didn't see sometimes many cars in the parking lot. They had to take a bus. And sometimes I would do Sankirtan there, especially when I just didn't want to really have to hassle people to take a book. Why would I go there? You think, well, they don't have any money. Why would you go there? Because the people that went there were people who didn't have a lot of money. And they were the most humble people. They were the most easy to approach. Excuse me, sir. And they would just stop like, who are you? What are you? It's just like they were in a humble position in life. And so when they looked at me, they didn't think, who are you, crazy guy in a robe? No, they were, those who are discriminated against tend to be more compassionate, more kind for the other odd people in society who may be discriminated against. So the purpose of saying that all of this is that if we are going to be truly compassionate, then we have to get out of the bubble of what we haven't experienced and haven't suffered, and see that see when and how others are in need, are suffering, are in whatever way being looked down upon, discriminated against, and so forth, and be a voice when sometimes they can't be a voice. In some way be a voice, somehow being a voice, it may just be, okay, I am not going to represent the prejudices that were implanted within me growing up. I'm going to realize the existence of these prejudices, and I'm going to not act upon them. I'm going to purify myself. I'm going to root them out. I think that's important. I don't know if we had talked about this, but in a class I gave on prejudice to some non-devotees and racism, I was making the simple point that living in a materialistic society, most of us are programmed subtly or not so subtly with prejudices. And it's just, you can't avoid it. It's around you, but it doesn't mean you act on it. It doesn't mean you think that way just because it's around you, but it means it got in, and we just have to make sure it's not working. It got in and it just dissolved because it didn't find a place in me. But as Vijay Lakshmi was saying yesterday, casteism is very strong in India. So it's very strongly programmed in, and you tend to see people and judge people by their names, by the color of their skins and neighborhoods and so forth. So these are all real problems. Now, here comes maybe the biggest problem, the ultimate hypocrisy. I'm not the body. and you're not the body, but I'm treating you like you are the body. So that's the problem with that, is that at least officially as devotees we stand for something. It's not like, the average person may be against racism, but not necessarily do they have a religion that's most fundamental principle is I'm not the body, which means it stands against racism 108%. Hold on a sec. So that's a little bit of an issue, and I think it's going to be a bigger and a bigger issue over time if within our organization we find any kind of discrimination, whether it's racial or gender or age, ethnicity, because the basis of our philosophy is we're not the body, so that makes us like hypocrites on steroids, right? I mean, we understand there's prejudice in the world, we understand there's hypocrisy, but we also understand people are conditioned. Like I was saying, I was raised in an all-white Jewish neighborhood. I didn't have friends that weren't white or weren't Jewish. I didn't even know there was a world beyond white and Jewish. And it was a community where money was never an issue for anybody. I didn't know people who had any financial problems. So that was the world I grew up in. So I think it's understandable, even innocent people may have racial prejudices just because of the environments they grew up, or maybe you live next to the Mexican neighborhood, and in the Mexican neighborhood, well, that's where all the thieves were stealing, and the shootings go on. But in our neighborhood, it didn't. So then you get this thing in your head that Mexicans are thieves and murderers, which is not true. It's just those Mexicans in that neighborhood, yeah, that's what they did. All Mexicans, thieves and murderers? Of course not. But naturally, as a young, impressionable person, you can get these ideas in your head. Maybe you don't believe them, maybe you do. Maybe they just get in somehow or other. It seems logical. So now it got in there for many of us, and our philosophy is we're not the body. So then it becomes like the ultimate hypocrisy when the basis of your main book, your main teaching is you're not the body, and then you're discriminating. Then it's like that doesn't work for a movement to spread around the world. It can't work. It can work. Maybe it can work in some sense in organizations that don't have a premise. I mean, it doesn't work anywhere, but especially doesn't work within an organization that's based on the fact, the principle, the teaching that we have nothing to do with the body. Of course, you might say, yeah, but there's male bathrooms and female bathrooms, so there is some discrimination. There's 4 varnas. Yeah, but that discrimination is not, okay, the male bathroom means the male bathroom is better. It gets cleaned 5 times a day, but the female bathroom only gets cleaned once a week. No. To have separate bathrooms is not discrimination. To have varnashram is not discrimination. Discrimination is when you treat people differently because you treat some people better, some people worse. Especially you deny privileges and you feel entitled because of your position. So that's something we have to work on and we have to be aware of. And I would encourage all of you, if you ever see a devotee in need or a group of devotees in need that you feel have been mistreated, marginalized, discriminated against, whatever. Could be women, could be youth, it could be African American, it could be anything. It could be Mexican, South American, Chinese, whatever. But more so, as we see the world, more so lower caste in India, African. I don't know in England how it is. In America, it's not good, as you know. So it's probably not good anywhere. So that's that's my understanding of compassion. That you feel, you notice the suffering, you feel it. And I think these examples of these homeless people that did these acts, it proves the point that Prabhupada was making, that when you suffer, you can better relate to the suffering of others. And so, it's hard when you're not suffering, because you forget that there are other people that are suffering. I was once accused of being a feminist, and I took that as such an accomplished. I took it as a real. What's the word? Why did I forget the word? I took it as a. I took it well. Like, thank you for saying that, because I was accused of being a feminist because I was representing concerns of women, which my god sister told me to do, which I thought I should do, and it's something I always did, because when I see any group of people that are getting a bad deal or a voice is not heard, I always feel like I should be a voice for them, if they can't be a voice for themselves, if they're getting shot down. And so when some people called me a feminist, I thought, I was looking for the word compliment. I thought, that is such a compliment. And then I had to look up in the dictionary what feminist meant. I actually didn't even know what it meant. Can you believe it? I didn't know. I said, what's a feminist? And as far as I understood or understand, what they meant was how could we put it? I wasn't giving the women a hard time like the other men. I don't know if that's what they meant, but that's what it boils down to. I was, being a voice for their needs and rights and so forth. And sometimes I like to watch, just every once in a while, it helps me. I don't know, maybe you think this is strange, but it helps me. I like to watch, just for a few minutes, something on YouTube where women do something amazing, like an amazing talk or amazing athletic feat, just to remind myself that, you're a man, doesn't mean you're better, doesn't mean you're good, because there's all these women who can make more money than you, who are more academic than you, who can speak better than you, who can play music better than you, who can do sports better than you. And, the male mentality is like, we were raised kind of thinking, we're better athletes, we're better this and that. And then, frankly, and it's hard to say this, but I think we all know this anyway, that for me at least, whatever little was put in by society, eventually, after joining ISKCON, it got worse. It didn't get better. It didn't go away. It actually got worse. Fortunately, I recognized it. And I think partially because I recognized it, that for some years I was at least not maybe minimizing women practically, but in my mind, trying to digest everything that was said in Shastra and trying to digest everything that was said in the early 70s by sannyasis who just were trying to put down women so they wouldn't end up falling in love with them, which is the whole other topic. And I think we've talked about that before. And so it had a little bit of effect on me, but I recognized it. And so these are things we have to watch out for. And so if we can become sensitive to it and become a voice, then we'll make ISKCON better. But if you see it, if you don't even see it, that's problem number one. Problem number two, you see it, you don't do anything about it. So how do you see it? We have to be more compassionate, which means more sensitive to how other people feel, more empathetic. And feel, compassion means you feel the pain another person feels, and that's what motivates you to help them. You feel their pain. We had told some stories of Prabhupada. There are many stories of Prabhupada where you could see he was feeling the pain of people, either because of what devotees were telling him was going on in the world, or because what he was seeing right in front of his eyes, what people were doing. You could see he felt the pain. And I think for Prabhupada, feeling the pain is different, a little different from us feeling the pain, in the sense that he has realization of Krishna. So to the degree that you realize Krishna, to that degree you understand how painful it is to not be Krishna conscious. So we may see somebody suffering in some way, and we think, oh, the world is bad, the governments are bad, this is unjust, this is horrible, we feel bad. But the more you understand Krishna through realization, then that looks worse. And the more you're Krishna conscious, the deeper your compassion will be. So they work together. It's like both things will go on. Oh, if you were just Krishna conscious, you would be so happy. This is what Krishna consciousness is. And in relation to that, when I look at you, I see how much you're suffering. Plus, because I'm Krishna conscious, I feel you're suffering more. So it's one of those things when you say, you think you're Krishna conscious and say, okay, you think you're Krishna conscious. What about this? What about, how do you feel when you see suffering? Does it bother you? I heard a story about Jaip Takamraj. He was, when he was recovering from his stroke and he was doing his therapy, he would go in and someone else needed help, or he saw someone that seemed to be in a worse condition than himself. Maybe they weren't, and it was his turn to do the exercise. And he said, no, let them do it. They need it more. It's just like a natural nature, I'm the guru, I have 40,000 disciples, I go first. No, not like that. No, let this person do it. They're suffering. So I think that's important. And then that was something, maybe that wasn't so obvious that we saw with Prabhupada. I mean, you could understand by his activities, you say they're all activities of compassion. But these little stories, like you probably all know this story that after Prasadam, the plates, banana leaf plates, were thrown out. And then in Mayapur, little kids from around our center who live near there were coming and they were just scraping food off the plate. And Prabhupada saw that and he was in shock. He was in shock. He said, how hungry must they be if that's what they're doing? And I think they had to chase the dogs away from the plates. And at that point, Prabhupada said, we have to start a program. That was kind of the inaugurating mantra of Food for Life. That, no one should, then Prabhupada said that you should feed people, nobody should go hungry within 10-mile radius of the temple. So that was the catalyst when he saw those kids. It's like, oh my God. Now, imagine, just put yourself in that situation. You were there in Mayapur, you had your prasadam, and you're happy, everything's nice. And then you're walking by and you see some poor kids and they're going through and they're looking for remnants on the plate. And you just walk by and you go shopping and buy your new dhoti or sari or whatever. Has that happened to you? Could that happen to you? Of course, it could happen, and it's probably happened to many of us. Do you know this story where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was on parikrama and some beggars were coming? And the grihastas weren't giving money, and he chastised them. He said, your heart will become hard if you don't donate, you don't give them money. So, sometimes, you're on your way to Lohi Bazaar to buy something you don't need. To buy your 896th sari or your 74th kurta, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? And there's some people who are doing madhukari begging, or just some poor people with leprosy, or and you just, out of my way, and then you go in your shop and buy your 74th kurta, You only need 3 kurtas. You can get by with 2. You could even get by with 1 if you wash it every night. But just in case, it's good to have 2. So you know what I'm saying. And I don't know if you ever thought like this before. Have you ever thought like this before? That I'm going to buy something I really don't need, and I'm walking by all these poor people who it's probably better I'd give them the money. So these are things to consider. And I don't know if you know this, but Sanatana Goswami said that it's not that as a devotee, our goal is just to, help poor people. That's what we do. Okay, we get up and, we just help poor people. And he said, but if you can do it, if there's a situation where it's not going to disrupt your bhakti, disrupt your service, and it's very easy for you to do it, and you're right in that situation where someone needs help, to not do it, it's wrong. It makes your heart hard. So these are important meditations. And as I said, I think it's important to recognize if there is prejudice that you were programmed with, whether or not it affected you, at least to be aware that it got in there, you grew up with it, just to reflect on how does that affect you now, and how does it in any way dampen your compassion so you're not feeling for the suffering of others. Those are realizations that I've had for many, many years, and I think I always appreciate, you probably do as well, I always appreciate devotees who become the mouthpiece for the devotees that don't have a mouthpiece. Like maybe they have an issue, but the leader won't hear it, but they'll take it upon themselves. So let me be the mouthpiece for these devotees because they're not being heard, or they're not being understood, or the severity of a situation is greater than what leaders may understand or believe, and they need to be a voice. They need to have a voice. Can you give them a voice? Are you in a position to give them a voice? Maybe you're not. Maybe you are. But if you are, can you give them a voice? Those are important thoughts. And again, I just want to underscore the problem that people are going to have in any spiritual movement is seeing discrimination within a spiritual movement. Because in theory, if there's anywhere there shouldn't be discrimination, it would be in a movement which it's based on the philosophy, we're not the physical body. So Bhaktivedanta Swami, when he joined ISKCON, he really felt that there was prejudice. And he went to Prabhupada and said, there's prejudice, racism in your movement. And Prabhupada didn't deny it. And he said, but, you're getting affected by it. So then it's like you're getting upset about the racism that makes you racist in a sense. Not exactly the way Prabhupada said it, but he said, you're getting affected by it also. So these are things to consider. And I don't know, Kamalakshi, if that's exactly the point you were addressing. But I think so, yeah. And this, this idea of white privilege, right? And like I was saying earlier, I think in defense of the white people who may do something wrong, sometimes they're in ignorance. They don't know. They don't realize it. They're just, it's kind of like, you look at slavery, right? And you think, how did the world tolerate slavery? Because it became normal. It's just how it is. So even though it's wrong or it's bad, it's because you grew up in a society with slavery that for most people, not everyone, but for most people or many people, that's just, that's what the black people do. There are slaves. And it's not white privilege, it's just, no, that's how the world is. White people run things, black people help them. What's wrong with that? It's just the way it is. And you might think, no, if they think that way, there's something wrong with them. And in a sense, of course, there is something wrong with them. But I'm just saying, in another sense, sometimes it's like all they know. It's like that's, I mean, look at this. This is like amazing. The people who wrote the Declaration of Independence, I think many, if not all of them, had slaves. I could go figure that one out. They wrote the Declaration, every man is created equal opportunity. And they had slaves. And the Declaration of Independence did not free the slaves from slavery. So that's interesting, isn't it? So I think in there is this paradox that they don't even realize that something is wrong, because in their life that's always been that way. So I think we have to, look at that in ourselves and say, well, maybe there's things that I haven't noticed because I've just accepted that's how it is. Oh, they're women, so women means this. They'll be over here in the back in the corner, and they'll make the garlands, and they won't give the class, and they won't lead the kirtan, or they won't do this and that. That's the way it's always been. And I don't feel it's discrimination. I just think, oh, that's just what they do. But we have to, look beyond that. Question those things, or at least think about those things and think, okay, is there something wrong with this? Is there another way to look at this? Am I looking at it in a very conditional way, in a way that's unfair? Those are my thoughts. And that was a long introduction to the class, which we may never have. So Kamalakshi says, that's part of it. Okay, well, tell me the other part. Because you're from our generation and your generation, our generation we had a lot of good stuff going on. We had a lot of bad stuff going on. Rachel from Israel says, what did she say? When we get to the spiritual world, do we still get to be in association with our spiritual master? Yes. Prabhupada will be there, Rachel, waiting for you. He'll introduce you to Krishna. Sound good? You want to go? I'm just going down to see. Yeah, of course, definition of compassion is help people come to Krishna consciousness. But the more you feel their pain, not being Krishna conscious, the more you'll be inspirated. That's what Krishna Karshini says, for inspiration. I'm very inspired. She makes up her own words, get by, but it's okay. I'm her English teacher. So Krishna Karshini says, with all expectations for ISKCON, with all respect for ISKCON, it seems that in many cases, many devotees become infected with prejudices in our movement. They came with positive attitude for women, but we programmed them to be negative. That is scary, that we preach we're not the body. We are the soul, but sometimes we are more focused on the bodies than non-devotees, yeah. So I think when I look at these things, and it's not just women, as you know, it could be the way we look on different ethnicities. Like you said, Polish people don't like Russians. Some people don't like black people. Some don't like Chinese people. Some may not. Mexico has a reputation in America as a place of crime and very dangerous. And I go to Mexico. I tell someone I'm going to Mexico. Oh, are you sure you want to go? When I'm going to my chiropractor, or we're going to the doctor and we want to make an appointment, I say, well, I can't make one for 6 months. I'm going to India. And they're like, oh, you have to go to India? Oh. Really? You're going to go to India? It's just, it's innocent ignorance. They think, I don't know what they're thinking. There's cobra's going to eat me up, or I'm going to starve. I don't know. So, rather than, well, this is the way I see it. I think we have to look at ISKCON compassionately with understanding as to why these things happen and what we have to do about it. And there are racial statements in our books. There are statements, derogatory statements about women in our books, and we have to understand them within the context with which they were written. And we have to understand who they're speaking about. There's derogatory statements about men, there's derogatory statements about various races. And so this is the way I see it, and we can discuss this, but if you understand what is being said in the scripture, it's being said there's different classes of people, they think differently, they have different natures, and they were created that way, different races, different natures, there's different kinds of human species. Once Prabhupada said monkeys were considered part of human species. Hare Krishna. That's interesting, right? And if you're making an objective reality, right? Okay, here's an objective reality, and I've told you this before. When I was in South Africa, it seems like every time I'm in South Africa, somehow the topic of violence and thefts come, because you just have to be a little careful. If it's early in the morning, don't go here, don't walk alone. So it's on your mind. You could be robbed, right? Because it's common. And so I asked the devotee, have you been robbed before? And he said, if you're South African, you've been robbed. Okay, so that's not true in America. It's probably not true in most places in the world. But I don't know if he meant if you're South African and you're not black, you've been robbed. So let's say there's a general truth to that. Then I'm just curious. I'd say, well, how safe is it now? Because I lived there in the 80s, and so I came back like 7-8 years ago, I think, the first time. Or 7 years, 2013, I think. First time I came back since 1982. So I would ask them, how safe is it? And they said, well, we were driving somewhere at night. He said, at this time of night, if we drive up this street, which is closer, faster to get home, we're probably going to get robbed. They're just going to come up to the car with a gun, and I guess they'll steal the car or steal our wallets. I don't know. I said, really? Yeah. So I said, is South Africa safe? He said, well, you just have to know where to go and where not to go. Where, don't drive in this neighborhood if you're not a black man, or if you don't have a gun, or if it's late at night. Something like that. All right. Okay. So now I'm this white Jewish guy from America who lived in an all-white neighborhood, and the black people had their neighborhood, they had their schools. We were more successful. We had the better homes, the better education. They were the better athletes and musicians. You can't deny that. So, and you see, in other words, it's like that got in there when I was young. Just, nobody had to say anything. I just lived in a different neighborhood, and we were better off. Said something, subtly. Now I'm in South Africa. Who's stealing? Not the white South Africans. Don't go to that white neighborhood because you might, they might steal something. So, okay, it's the black people who are stealing. Okay, and you go, there's a lot of, or in America, the Mexican, the lower east, they go to East LA, Chicano, Mexican. It's not always safe there. So, Chicanos, violence. It's just, I think it's innocent. But at the same time, there's some truth to that. No, just objectively, why it's like that. Maybe because they were disadvantaged, they weren't given education, they came from unstable families. There may be so many reasons that could solve the problem, and it wouldn't be like that if the problem were solved. But you don't know that. You're just seeing it, right? And so, but people are different. And so sometimes in Shastra, those differences, those tendencies to be a certain way are described. You know, as a woman, Krishna Karshini, what the Shastra describes about women. You know it well. All you women know it well. And you read those things and you think, there may be some women are like that, not all women. Maybe some things you say, yeah, I'm like that. I think all women are like that. But when it goes through the system of a person who is not entirely, how should we say, well, I'll just say balanced, or a person who has an agenda in their mind, or a person who believes Prabhupada thinks a certain way, then it gets in there, it can come out in the wrong way. And so that's what we've seen, and that's what we have to be careful about. And so all I can say to you is if you read anything in Shastra that seems to be racist, just know that Prabhupada was not racist. Prabhupada never discriminated. He never dealt with women or black people or Chinese people or Russian people any differently than he dealt with anybody. He dealt with everybody the same. And that's important. So he's reading the same books, processing the same thing. It's saying this. These are broad generalizations that may apply in some situations or may apply generally. But he dealt with the people individually. And I think the problem is we start making broad generalizations. All Africans are like this. All women are like this. All Mexicans are like this. All Chinese are like this. All Americans are like this. The Germans, they're like this. And there may be truth, obviously the Germans and the Africans and the Americans and the Chinese, they all have their little nature. You can't deny that. But to use that against them, to put them down, to discriminate, that's what's wrong. Because I think sometimes the problem is that sometimes people will say, look at, we don't want prejudice, we don't want racism, but if you just look objectively, certain races do things better than other races. They are, even you put women down, but they do things better. Certain things better. Even you put black people down, but they do certain things better. I mean, look at sports today. I mean, football, basketball. It's, white guys are like oddballs now, at least in basketball, isn't it? So the problem, which we didn't see in any way affect Prabhupada, the pure devotee, was that there may be some objectivity and say this race has a tendency to act in a particular way. This group of people were born in a disadvantaged position. This group of people were not educated. But he never dealt with them like, I'm better than you, or that you don't have equal rights with everyone. He never did that. So I think that's where the problem lies, that not all devotees 100% can do that well. And they've come to ISKCON with already a little bit of baggage. And so unless you're sensitive to this, unless you're aware of this, that's when you're going to run into problems. Now, I think you all understand this. I probably didn't even have to say that, but anyway, I said it, so. But the thing that probably concerns me most, or one of the things that concerns me, there are obviously more than one thing, but one of the biggest concerns I have is exactly what you stated here, that let's say someone joins ISKCON, and let's say as a result of that, over the years, they actually become more prejudiced against a certain race or certain races or against certain genders or so forth than they were before. That is, in my mind, that is that falls on ISKCON as an organization, ISKCON leadership itself, as the ultimate failure, because how can you fail more than become the very opposite of what Prabhupada taught you to be? I mean, what could be a greater failure than that, right? Here Prabhupada comes to give a teaching, and it ends up that his followers practice, think, develop attitudes which are opposite of what he taught. What could be worse than that? And that Prabhupada comes to save people from the condition of suffering, exploitation, racism, prejudice, and so forth. And then they come in all. All living entities, including animals, yeah. Compassion is an intrinsic quality of the soul. Yeah, there are stories of animals taking care of other animals in distress, even not in their own species. Yeah. I've never heard of cultures which denied or didn't know what compassion was about. I tried to, Vrindavan Leelas, I tried to be compassionate with a neighbor. My old apartment, I gave her some money to help her out. However, it became a problem when she started asking me for money every week. You reminded me of a story. I was thinking, I have a godbrother. He's really funny. He doesn't try to, you know those people who are really funny and they don't try to be? They're just, that's how they are. They're just funny. You know those kinds of people? So he's like, he comes to Alachua and he's like, we're talking, and then after we're talking, he says, Prabhu, could you give me some money? I don't have much money. So I open my wallet and there's $20. I go, okay, here, take $20, whatever. And then he said, can you give me some more money? That's not very much. Hare Krishna. That was funny. This devotee is funny. I was just thinking about that the other day. Gabriela says, sometimes I think that we have had more privileges, have more responsibility to empathy. Yeah, those who have more privileges have more responsibility to empathize with the suffering of others. It's true. And not to be able to do something with that problem, for example. Okay, I have to go back. For example, facilitating access to more opportunities to others, giving containment and protection to people who suffer, doing our best to create a change, communities where we participate to make them more loving, inclusive, being respectful with our actions and use of language. Well, that's a long list, and it's just the beginning of a longer list. So, the one point one point you can say from this conversation is really it's about being conscious. Isn't it? It's about being conscious of what's going on around you. And I think also we run into a problem where we think, well, if I just go out and distribute books, I'm doing the best service. And no doubt you are doing the best service. But in the name of doing the best service, then we may forego these other qualities and actually forego compassion in other ways. Well, I don't have anything else to do because I'm doing the best work possible. You're doing the best work possible, but it doesn't eliminate other things. And, I've done what I can, Are you mistreating other devotees, other people? Are other devotees being mistreated? Are there things you can do about it? Can you be a voice? So these things are important. Krishna Karshani says, I know how to be black. I was black 2 lives before in the U.S. Very interesting. I was killed by a white man who hated blacks. Very traumatic experience. Difficult to digest, even after 2 lives. Without Jayadev Prabhu's help, she did a past life regression. Would not have made it. He helped her, she saw that, and then he helped her overcome the trauma of that. Hare Krishna. Yeah, we're not just, appearing with a blank slate. We've got a whole history. Thank you for starting this life link. This is a great topic, right? Kamini says, in some countries in Europe, they have dollar stores, but not in Switzerland. Yeah. Switzerland's what, the $20 store? Switzerland. Yeah. I mean, in discussing humility, we discussed the point that it's interesting that the people who have the best qualities often have the hardest time being humble. And the problem is, I may be better at you at doing something, but it doesn't mean I'm better than you. And oftentimes it's hard to separate those two, isn't it? Well, I have a better education. That means I'm more well educated than you, but it doesn't mean as a person I'm better than you. It doesn't mean I have a right to exploit you or to discriminate against you. But when I have that better education or better whatever, and we're just speaking objectively, this is not like you think you're more well educated. No, I graduated from a good university. You only went to high school. So just objectively on paper, my education is better. Well, that doesn't make you better. Exactly, it doesn't make me better. It just makes me better qualified to work in a certain field. So that's where the problem comes, that if I am better materially, then I think I'm better than another person. And this conversation is so interesting because the actual solution to this problem is humility. That would solve everything. Because when humility develops, you never think you're better. It doesn't matter how qualified you are. You will never think you're better than somebody, which is like, it doesn't make sense to the material side of our mind, because we see, and this is so natural, that when you're better, you just feel you're better. They go together naturally, right? You can't separate them. But when you're humble, it doesn't matter what's happening on an objective level. You don't see yourself as better. That's amazing, isn't it? You see yourself as a servant of others. You respect everyone, no matter what your position is. And that, of course, would solve this whole problem if everybody felt that way. So ultimately, humility is the basis to come to this point of non-discrimination, because at that point, you will equally respect everyone. Kishore Mani says, with all due respect, dear Maharaj and devotees, we must not use philosophy to cover the lack of compassion. And we cannot pretend that we are compassionate on a spiritual level if we do not empathize the material level first with devotees and other people in general. I hope the day that let's stop discriminating by race, gender, age, or how much money you have. It's a very painful reality that is everyone's responsibility to change. It is a painful reality, and the only way you can deal with a problem is to state it. there was a Facebook talk with 4 African American devotees. Kamania has the link. If you can put that link up, Kamania, I think everyone should watch that. It will help you a lot. And one of the devotees one of the African American devotees was being frank about his experience being an African American devotee in ISKCON. And he was just stating the reality, and everyone was appreciating the fact. It was kind of like, you're stating what's actually going on, that nobody has ever really come out and said it this way. So what I saw, that when he was speaking, he was getting so many positive comments. He was just saying how he feels as a black person being discriminated in ISKCON. He said not everyone discriminates, of course not, but some. And he was just expressing how hard it is for him and difficult it is. And so many people were saying, thank you for saying this, thank you for saying this, it's so important. So to solve a problem, you have to come out and admit, okay, this is what's going on. You just have to, it's not, you're not accusing anybody. And ultimately, we're trying to look at ourselves. But you have to just admit it, like, this is going on. And we need to talk about this reality. And I need to look at this reality within myself. And as I said, a lot of it is innocent. You're just raised, in a one race, a vanilla neighborhood. My neighborhood was plain vanilla. There was just like only one kind of person. That's how I grew up. So, and I didn't grow up in a family who was preaching to me every day, everyone's equal, treat everyone equally, they're all spiritual beings, they're not the body, this and that, you really, you should have friends with the Mexicans, you should have friends with the black people. I wasn't raised in a family like that. So naturally, you have to educate yourself. You have to catch yourself when you're seeing things in a certain way and say, no, that's wrong. That's not our philosophy. Now, Kishore Mani, this is where it gets really problematic. It gets problematic when we become leaders, when we have influence over others, when people listen to us, when people watch us, when in other people's minds our behavior is modeling the behavior of pure Krishna consciousness. That's when it becomes a huge problem. It's a problem in the heart of anyone. It becomes a huge problem when it's in the heart of leaders. And I'm only saying this because all of you are leaders or will be leaders of some sort. And as I've often said, if you stay in ISKCON long enough, then you're older, so younger people will look up to you. Even if you don't say, I'm not a leader, I'm not, yeah, but when you're walking around, when you're 70, and that means you've been a devotee like 40 years or more, or maybe 50 years, or 70 years if you were born a devotee, people are going to, the 20-year-olds are going to look at you and think, wow, you've been a devotee your whole life, and now you're 70, can I touch your lotus feet? And you'll be thinking, no, I'm just like nobody, I'm an ordinary person. And that's how we should feel. But they're not going to look at you that way. And you're thinking, don't look at me as an example, I'm a bad example. But you can't think that way because people look to you as an example. So what you do is going to influence them. Wow, you've been a devotee 70 years, And if after 70 years of being a devotee, they see discrimination in you, that's going to really disturb them, and it's going to make it hard for them to be Krishna conscious. And so this is something you can't get around. It's just by being a devotee long enough, you garner some respect or some expectations are going to be there that you're going to act in a certain way. And if we all take that seriously, to exemplify Krishna consciousness in every way, and especially in these ways, that's what's going to make the difference. Otherwise, what Krishna Karshani said, it's going to keep happening. And that is like the worst thing in my mind, at least for me, say, what's your ISKCON nightmare? My ISKCON, we all have our ISKCON nightmare, right? We all have our ISKCON dream and nightmare. What's your ISKCON nightmare? My ISKCON nightmare is people come to ISKCON and they become worse in certain ways than they were before they were devotee. That's horrible. That's not even a nightmare. I'd say it's a horror movie. Worse than a nightmare. So the more of us that set the example, then the less likely this problem is going to happen, because there'll be good examples. People will come, they'll be surrounded by good examples, they'll become better. So these are real problems, and you have to talk about them, and you have to get them out. And you have to get them out on the table, into people's ears, in front of them. That's how we solve them. And so that's why I'm talking about it, because you know that I like to talk about things that need to be talked about, that are not often talked about. And what I find, my experience is that when you talk about these things, so many devotees appreciate it. And they say, thank you for speaking about that, because I was feeling the same way. A lot of times devotees tell me, I was feeling the same way, but I didn't know if it was offensive. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if my thinking was correct. So I never said anything. But now you are articulating exactly what I was thinking, and that makes me feel, okay, that I was right, and I feel validated, and I'm happy you said that. That happens to me a lot. So that's why these things have to be spoken. And what the other nightmare for me in ISKCON is not be able to speak about these things, to not have a forum for speaking about these things. And I think if ISKCON doesn't have the forum for speaking about these things, they're going to be spoken about in some other forms. Hopefully in a healthy way, but it may not always be healthy. So... In a recent interview, Achyuta Gopi said that everyone who thinks they're not racist should ask him or herself, how would it feel if my child wanted to marry a colored person? Would it be okay with? Yeah, that's a great question. Would it be okay? Would you be okay with that? It's really simple, but a profound, and enlightened question. Exactly. Or, well, you see, you're talking about here like to a white person. But look at India. What if my daughter wants to marry a guy of another caste? He's Indian, he's Hindu, he's just of another caste. That's a problem. Now, it may be a problem because their natures are different. And if their natures are different, it's not a matter of black, white, or caste. It's just different natures. So there's some consideration. But if their natures are not different, and it's just based on family, same thing. It's harder to, it's not so noticeable in India because everyone's some color of brown. Easier to notice in America because there's white and brown. India, there's just dark brown and light brown and medium brown and tan. But it's the same thing, right? And I'm sure in every society you have the same, You're going to marry, we're Jewish. You got to marry someone who's Jewish. My wife's Jewish. I guess it made my father happy. My mother wasn't alive, but I guess it made him happy, Adam. The Frank store, one Frank. So, Kamaniya is putting up the talk I was talking to you about. It's worth watching. It's very educational, especially if you're not black. If you're black, probably everything they say, you'll just be, yeah, and you'll just be depressed. I don't know. You won't be depressed, but especially if you're not black, you need to watch it. Regarding what you said, that to have compassion, we need to experience suffering, I tend to agree. I know a devotee who never experienced suffering. He is coming from a wealthy family and had a good life since childhood, and I see a lack of empathy in this person. Interesting. This person just doesn't understand suffering of others. Yeah, that's my point. And so you have to get out of your world and get in the world and see from another person's point of view. And that's not always easy to do. Because, we see the world the way we see it. And to see it some other person's way, wow. That is sometimes extremely difficult. It's not in your experience. How I'll even see it their way, I don't even have that experience. That's the challenge. John, when I worked as a counselor for a Native American community, I had to let go of everything I learned. Ego, and accept the anger, suffering, and their anger and their suffering in order to really see harder. Though, for me, to do this with close family, at times without Krishna's help. Harder. Yeah. It was harder to do it with family. John worked as a counselor in the native Indians, and he's a white guy in an Indian community. So, and we white guys are the ones who pretty much ruined their lives in America. So he had to learn to see things from their perspective. And he's saying it's harder to do with family. Yeah, it's true. I had this yesterday. I said something. My wife wasn't happy with what I said. And then I had to think, no, but, it was nothing, But then she said, well, it was insensitive to how I feel. And then I said, okay. Then I understood. I said, yeah. I put myself in her position. I said, yeah, from my position, if someone said that to me, I would just be like, whatever. I wouldn't think anything of it. I wouldn't feel it. But understanding her position, then, okay, now I understand why she's upset. Because I thought, well, it's your problem you're upset because I didn't say anything wrong. And that could be true, but it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, because what's true is she was not big upset, but she was a little upset about it. And I came in and I said, I'm sorry, it was the wrong thing to say. It wasn't wrong, but it was wrong to say that to her. If I said it to someone else, it might not have been wrong. But the fact that it didn't land right on her, it forced me, okay, I said, okay, I have to see this from her perspective, because from my perspective, there's nothing wrong, and if someone said that to me, I would be fine. I said, so why did she feel that? Oh, now I know why she felt that way, because we were talking about something that was very important, and I said, well, we've talked about it enough, and let's not talk anymore. Which was true. We talked about it enough, and but it was taken like, oh, you're invalidating me. And then when I understood that, I said, oh yeah, that was the wrong thing to say. But only by getting from her perspective could I feel and understand that. Which is, and I, after I did it, I thought, that's not always so easy, because I thought, well, I'm right. So to see from another person's point of view, you all know this, I don't have to tell you, it can be extremely difficult. It's a huge challenge. Kishore Mani and Vijay Lakshmi, the concept would not work here. The Swiss prefer to pay more for a better quality product, which lasts longer, which actually I like. And Liddy are cheap. And Aldi and Liddy are cheap. Those are stores. Okay, I have a story. When there was a problem with the microphone, I don't know what it was. It was probably just not plugged in right. And it was disturbing. We couldn't start class. Prabhupada was giving class. And then it was like, they're trying to fix it. I don't think it was actually a problem with the microphone. It was either cable or something wasn't plugged in well, or this or that. Cockroaches got in the, what do we say? There's ghosts. Ghosts got in the amplifier. Hobgoblins got in the amplifier. And Prabhupada said, Bengali saying, when you buy something, buy the best. So, over the last year, it's been a long road, but I finally completely surrendered to this concept. Don't buy something if it's not good. It's just like I started getting things that I needed for my service that like they're, you know, a little more expensive, maybe 10% more, 20% more. Which in some cases only means spending 20 instead of 10. Like, why should I bought, look what I bought. I think this was like $20. This is, I don't have a reader on my computer, so I have to get an external one. Right? It's like, this big thing you bought for $20, you could get like for $5 USB. Yeah, I've gone through 2 of the $5 USB ones. They're both broken, right? So I finally got this. This thing will never break unless a truck runs over it. And it still may not break. And they say in France, I don't know if you know this company, they say, I can't afford it, it's too cheap. Which means it's going to break down, I'll have to buy another one, so I can't afford to buy another one. And so, you know, more and more I was going through, you know, what I need in my service, and just kind of like, oh, this thing doesn't work. It lasted, you know, 3 weeks. And this thing, oh, it's still working after 20 years. I go, yeah, that's when you buy, you know, say, no, but this works just as well as that. Yeah, but in 10 years, this thing won't work at all. But this thing will, because you paid more. Generally, that's how it works. So that's what I have to say about that. And that's all I have to say about that. And I've said it. And it's over. Okay. Kamini says, being called a feminist was the acknowledgement that you were fulfilling your calling to stand up against discrimination. Yeah, that's how I took it. So when they called me a feminist, I said, thank you. I take it as a compliment. Wonderful question. We can also ask ourselves, how would I feel and act if my child wanted to marry a person from the same sex or some transgender? Yeah. It can also allow us to know our prejudices. Yeah, this is such an interesting topic because it kind of goes to the core of our conditioning that I'm the body, and you know, any issue, transgender, homosexuality, black, white, anything. If in any way in discussing that issue there's any lack of empathy or compassion, then that's not Krishna consciousness. There can't be any lack of empathy or compassion in any discussion about anything, whether it's social, political, or whatever. That's where we start going downhill. The more we are Krishna conscious, the more spiritually compassionate we become. Otherwise, the concept of compassion could become material in terms of philanthropy, yeah, civil rights. There are certainly good values, but remain limited to the material dimension, yeah. It should everything should be generated from a spiritual reality. Dear devotees, here's another video that I encourage you to watch. Join Rama Tulsi Morrison, Prema Vilasini, Sundari Gopi, and Chaitanya Chintamani for candid discussion about being a woman in ISKCON. Oh my God. Hosted by Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast. Yeah. Haven't watched it yet, just heard about it. Fantastic. Now I have a question. The link is here, right? So then I finish class, I upload it, and then where does the link go? Like, how does everybody get this link? It's like you have to hit that link right now. Otherwise, and I'm hitting it and nothing happens. So what do we do with this link? Because I like to watch it. Because I'm meditating a lot right now I'm meditating on the future, like what ISKCON is going to look like in the future. And I'm meditating on how devotees can be happy, why people would leave, why people would turn against an organization. And hearing from all these devotees who've experienced any kind of discrimination is very edifying for me. So I really want to hear it. So what do we do when you put it in this link? Now what happens to it? When I hit upload, you know, that's it. I'm a feminist. Yeah, maybe they'll call me a black activist also in the future. Could be an article. So you think you're Krishna conscious. Okay, that's a good one. I like that. So you think you're Krishna conscious. Okay, what if your daughter married a blank? What if your son married a blank? You know the story, this old Gujarati grandmother, she's a disciple of Radhanath Swami. They're trying to pick a husband for her granddaughter. And they picked thinking of a white devotee. Said, I'll never let him marry an American, never, never. He has to marry an Indian. They said, Grandma, where's your guru from? America. And she kind of like, okay. So, it's deep in there in all those Indian grandmas, right? Could you imagine your daughter married an American man? What could be worse? Malecha, a meat eater. Oh my God. So I think the thing is, we need to understand why people would think that way, isn't it? I don't think it's fair to condemn people because, in a sense, it's just like there's innocent prejudice. And so, if it's innocent prejudice, it's not right, but it just means that people have to become aware of it. And we understand that a lot of prejudice is innocent. Vijayalakshmi, but Prabhupada said not to give money, to give donation in the form of food. They may use it for alcohol. Yeah, generally, that's true. But in Vrindavan, well, there are examples of, example I give, right? It's cold out, there's some beggar or something, they don't have sufficient warm cloth. And you just take your sweater off and say, here, take the sweater, because you have 10 more sweaters at home. So, and you can do that. There's no problem. You won't die if you take your sweater off. So things like that. And the Brajbasis are not alcoholics, so donating to the devotees in Vrindavan. I experienced it in Vrindavan and in Mayapur. I understood how spoiled I am. Yeah, this is one of the things that I think, okay, this class is going long, but it has to. I think it's really one thing that helps me a lot, and it can help you. If you see a situation in your own life or see a situation in ISKCON, ask yourself, what if, my sister just came, or my brother just came, or my mother just came, and saw this? What would they think? Or just my old friend I haven't seen in so many years, I invite him to the temple or to India, and he sees this. And what is the this he's seeing? It could be this could be many things. And this is one thing. Devotees going to Lohi Bazaar to buy something they really don't need, and ignoring all the beggars or giving the beggars 10 rupees and then spending 10,000 on something. And you think, what would this person think when they saw that? And I think a lot of times we don't think that way. We don't see it that way. And it's really helpful. A person who's coming and just saying, they would have a vision often that we don't have. To say that this is not right. Why are you doing this? You're supposed to be renounced. You're supposed to be detached. You're supposed to live simply. And, I think that way all the time. When I need something, I'm thinking, do I really need it? I'm going to spend this money. It'd be nice to have, but do I need it? And, that money could be used in other ways. Some time ago, I was reading Kamsa's comments to Vasudeva and Devaki in Krishna book. As you sometimes say, he was singing shlokas. He was slinging shlokas at them. Don't sling shlokas. No, we have to come up with a good one. Yeah. Anyway, slinging shlokas. Say that 10 times fast. Slinging shlokas at them. The same Kamsa that couldn't stand the idea of being Krishna conscious. Of being killed by Krishna was perfectly explaining Krishna conscious philosophy to them in order to explain away and pacify their suffering for losing their children on account of his cruelty. I thought to myself, wow, I'm closer to Kamsa than I am to Krishna. Don't most of us often act like that? Oh, what a good example. Thank you for that. That is amazing. Using the philosophy to justify being in Maya. That's another good title, Kruti. That's a good title for a book. Using the philosophy to justify being in Maya. Do you use the philosophy to justify being in Maya? Well, I don't know if you do, but it's a good question to ask. Isn't it? My husband has 3 kurtas, which is not enough because I am the one who has to wash them when he gets them all dirty in 2 days and needs a clean one. You know what I do, Kamalakshi? When we were in the temple, we would wash our dhotis and kurtas every day to be clean and fresh. And especially if you're going on the altar, you have fresh clothes. But out of compassion for my wife, I try to keep my clothes clean and don't unnecessarily throw them in the laundry. So, I have very little laundry. Sometimes I go traveling and they say, do you have any laundry? I say, no. They come back the next day. Do you have any laundry? No. They want to have my laundry. I'm not going on the altar. You don't have to wash a clean shirt. It's already clean. I can sprinkle water on it and purify it. So, be compassionate on your laundry washers. Don't get your clothes dirty. And use deodorant. Are there any transgenders in Krishna consciousness that I know of? Offhand, I don't know any. Yeah, well, some. I'm not sure the technical definition of transgender. Does it mean you have to have an operation, or I'm not sure. Anyway, if there aren't, there will be, and I'm sure there are anyway. Does ISKCON preach to them? Well, I don't know. We would. I mean, we don't. In theory, we preach to anybody who wants to be Krishna conscious. Thank you for recognizing and highlighting these issues. That's Lucy from Lucy Bal. I never said your whole name. Lucy Balwetu Sisanti from South Africa. Lucy was raised in the Gurukul, but it was a Muslim Gurukul. Right, Lucy? Not a Krishna conscious Gurukul. That was she. Her life is interesting. 11 saris to 1 kurta, appropriate ratio. Yeah, it's about right. Okay, all of you. See, I have a disadvantage with the 11 to 1 ratios because people give me kurtas and dhotis, and so I think I think my wife is like I'm not so far behind her right now. I throw away stuff periodically. I have to. It's like, get so much. It's like, give it away, throw it away. No, I don't throw it away. Give it away. Or turn it into cleaning rags. Christianity failed in the West because those very whites encouraged slavery. Yeah. Kamini says, I agree. White people can be said to be innocently ignorant about white privilege until it comes to our attention. Yes. Then it becomes our responsibility to unpack it. If we don't choose to do something about it, then we become complicit in the systematic racism, yeah. In other words, she's saying if you see it and you don't do anything and you're aware of it, then now you're guilty. Sins of omission, sins of commission, omission. You didn't do it. The sin of not doing it. Thank you for thinking about the welfare of the minority. You're welcome. South Africa is heavily notorious for crime, intolerance, and injustices. Hare Krishna, Lucy. Is the crime notoriety before or after apartheid? Is it connected to apartheid? Yes, yes, yes. I'll let her answer, but see, the problem during apartheid, she's answering. To be honest, it has gotten to the point where we no longer become surprised at the things that happen. Everyone is a victim these days, worse in the townships or black neighborhoods. Yeah. See, the problem... Here's the problem. Oh, Lucy's replying. It is a complex matter because the answer could be yes or no, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting, so to speak. To a degree, yes, but we cannot take away the fact that consciousness is also an issue. You know, see, the problem is, this is a traditional historical problem. You're in the minority, you're oppressed. You overturn the majority, you come into power, and then you oppress the former majority. Or you start oppressing your own people. I think we saw that after Nelson Mandela, right, Lucy? Nelson Mandela was there. He was magnanimous, generous. You know what, Nelson Mandela, when he got his first paycheck, he said, this is like twice the money I need. So he gave half his paycheck every month to charity. Interesting, right? And then after him, I don't know if it was immediately after him, there was a kind of a playboy prime minister, right? Yeah. So, yeah, broadcast, did it stop? No, it's going. So this is a common problem. You know, you're oppressed, you get into power, and then you oppress. When I was in South Africa during apartheid, what I saw, the problem I saw was that they didn't give the black people opportunity. They just kept them like, you know, here's your cage and you can't go out of the cage. So the education they had for the white people was tremendous, but it was really hard to get a good education if you weren't white, or maybe Indian also. The whites had it better than the Indians had it better than the blacks. So they didn't have opportunity. And so if you don't have opportunity, you don't have money, then they just felt like, what's the problem of stealing from the white people? They have so much, they've not given us opportunity, so we have a right to steal from them. I remember once some curtains were stolen from our temple. It's like, curtains? That's strange. Why would you steal curtains? And then I was thinking, well, probably they don't have curtains. And probably they think, well, you're white guys in a rich neighborhood. If we steal your curtains, you'll just buy more. It's not a big thing for you. So it's understandable, right? That you've been held down. You have the worst jobs, the worst education, the worst neighborhoods. And as far as I know, the white South African government didn't even take care of the townships. They just let the people take care of it, form their own police force and so on. And that didn't work out so well. That's what I understand. But I will say this, a lot of the white people took really good care. They had black people that lived on their property, and they took care of them like family. Maybe some people would argue and say, no, that wasn't fair. And some people, I think in some cases that's true, but I think in some cases they did take well care of them, and the people who were serving them, the maids and so, were happy. So, you know, it's not just all black and white. I hate to say that, but it's a problem we can see in every religious organization. People just find something they can relate in the philosophy and distort it completely and justify their sick mind, yeah. We give classes on balance. Maybe we should talk about this in our class on balance on Thursday, because if you're not a balanced person, then you get the philosophy in your head, but then it can come out in some awkward ways. It can come out in a way that it wasn't intended to, as we see with terrorism and so forth. So this is really important. In a sense, Scripture is dangerous in the hands of people who are not balanced, because they'll misinterpret or misuse, or both. Welcome, Anna. You're back. The late morning program, Namras. Okay, so how do I see all these things you're posting here after the class? Post the link. Can you post the link to the video of the black devotee sharing his experience? That's Kamaniya, that's the show where Kishore was sharing with Brajalila and Ekavira and Jai Jagannath. That's it? All right. I posted already, Kamalaksha, right above. Are you referring to interview with Chuta Gopi? Yeah, so we should watch both. Fortunately, people bring their personal problems and personalities in ISKCON and in the devotional service and the association with other devotees. What I see is that we miss the counseling part. Try to create a group and mostly try to improve personality. This will come with advancement in the devotional services. It may take time. Shouldn't we take care of this? That's what I'm doing. You should have seen the course we did this year in Mayapur. It was amazing. It was more amazing. It's hard for me to say it was amazing because I created it, but it was more amazing than I thought. It was very, very, we're looking at ourselves. Look in the mirror. What's wrong with you? Why are you so messed up? Not exactly that was the mood, but that was objectively what we were trying to do. And yeah, so if you look at my lectures and courses, they very much focus on dealing with your stuff, your beliefs, your attitudes, your self-concepts, your prejudices, all that. I just ask devotees to look at it because I think my realization is that we're sometimes too transcendental and we're focused on things so transcendental we neglect these things. And like the Buddhist groups are more focused on this kind of stuff, and that attracts a lot of people. And it creates, at least on an emotional, mental level, it creates an environment where people can grow in a healthy way. And so we have a lot of emotionally sick or mentally ill people trying to become devotees. Obviously that's going to be problematic for them and everyone around them. The Bengali saying is probably one of the few things they have in common with the Swiss. Yeah. The Bengali saying is, when you buy a microphone, buy a Neumann. For those of you who know, Neumanns are expensive microphones, made in Germany. I am not rich enough to buy cheap stuff. There it is. Penny wise, pound foolish. In Greece, we say, I pray more. I pay more, so I pay less. Yeah. There is some confusion regarding the video links I posted. I will share them again. One is at the link, probably just now read. We can watch all the videos. Email these, okay. This is the link that Mahaprabhu asked. Black Lives Matter, okay. Oh, today's ISKCON. Thanks for reminding me. Haven't eaten yet, so no problem. It's recommended for you all. Please watch this. Muslim Gurukuli indeed. Transgender people have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from their sex assigned. Yeah, no, obviously we have devotees like that. Some transgender people who desire medical assistance to transition from one sex. Desire medical assistance to transition from one sex to another, identify as transsexual. Transgender, often shortened as trans, is also an umbrella term. Only some choose gender reassignment. Yeah, that's why I was confused. There are transgender devotees in ISKCON, just as Prabhupada told the devotee who was coming dressed sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman. Choose your gender. Dress and be steady. It's a little awkward for the opposite sex if a man wears a sari and hangs out in the brahmacharya ashram, because we've had that. So, these things you have to deal with. if you want to see the real character of a person, give him power and money and see what he does. Yeah. I've often said that in class, Anna. I said, if I gave everyone $1 million, like in Bhagavatam class, if I gave all of you $1 million today, would you be in class tomorrow? Where would you be? Okay, thank you, Kaminiya. Mayapur retreat was amazing. I realized how many prejudices I have, and I was not aware of them even. Yeah, that's the point. There's a lot going on inside we're not aware of. And so if we can be made aware of it one way or another, that's going to help us a lot, because then we can start working on it. Here is another interview of Black Body devotees headed by Bhakti Center. Prayer Revolution with Prajarani. Okay. Without aham brahmasmi, there's no beginning of spiritual awakening in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. And then, so this is, I think the name of this class can be, if somebody, oh, I guess you can't put the name in. The irony, I don't know, how should we say it? The irony of I'm not the body. The irony being that we don't realize it and we don't act like it. Or that some people who don't know they're not the body act more like soul than some people who know they're not the body. Yeah. Okay, that was a long class, but it was worth it. So it had to be said. And I think it would be nice if somebody at some point can take some excerpts of this class and we can make a small video. Any video editors out there? Anyone that wants to learn video? You can take some points from this class, because then we could like give 20 minutes of it. I think that would help a lot of devotees, don't you? Which is why it took so long. If we could take like 20 minutes, just cut little pieces. Or I think I may be able to get someone to do it, if there's no one out there that can do it. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi.